From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How today, Joelle?
I'm feeling a bit flat.
Yeah, why is that?
We've got some two people at home with man flu or boy flu, depending on which one I'm talking about, I suppose. So yeah, that's happening.
Yeah, and as I just said to you off air, I'm surprised you're at work because that's life-threatening man flu, and it feels like you should be at home supporting those men in your life. I'm
confident that my adult husband can manage without me.
Oh, it's
for
quite
the 8 hours. That
having experienced man flu several times myself, it's quite debilitating and it's hard to get out of bed or do anything.
If he hadn't already had it for a week and he's sort of on the recovery end of it now, then yeah, may have been in a work from home situation for the week.
Yeah.
But I prefer to get out of the germ factory as much as possible as well.
Yeah, I think we should have a man flu expert on at some point just to dispel the myths perpetuated by females regarding how it is not as bad as what men make it out to be, because it is seriously bad, having experienced it myself.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to just the regular flu?
Yes.
Have you had a regular flu, or have you only? Yeah, you've only had man flu.
Yeah.
So you've got nothing to compare it to.
Oh, I can see. My wife seems to operate quite well when she's got the flu. Still, like cook meals and stuff like that. Yeah. Mm. So clearly, it doesn't affect her as much as it does me. And the only difference is that she's a woman and I'm a man.
I think there's probably some other differences.
Okay. Well, that's why I think we need to clear it up. Probably,
apparently, it's the estrogen. That was the thing that Dan circulated the other week, saying that there was scientific evidence of men having it worse than women when it came to flus, and apparently the estrogen is the thing that makes it not as bad for women, allegedly. Allegedly,
yeah. We should get an expert to corroborate that. Yeah.
Well, probably a gender-balanced panel of experts.
Yeah, like that diversity panel that we're looking at, that was all like, middle-aged males, which was a great panel. Super
diverse.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress. We're not a podcast that's about health matters.
We are about health and safety.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We're not really about colds and flus, though.
No, more psychological health and safety. Yeah. So I should probably...
What's inside your head, not what comes out of your nose.
That's right. You don't want what's in your head coming out of your nose. That would be bad.
No, that would be...
I'm not a doctor, but I'm assuming that would not be great.
Yeah. Ill-advised.
So maybe you should introduce our guest.
Let's do that.
Yeah. He's a self-described recovering corporate executive who was on a mission to decrapify work. I like him already. He writes blogs and speaks regularly on leadership teams and future of work and the insanity of the organizations. He helps people start mutinies. Oh, okay. I didn't read this beforehand. Okay, so he's a pirate.
Yep.
Breaks rules and makes good trouble as opposed to bad trouble. He is a founder of Decrapify Work. Great name for a company. I'm not sure if we could register that as a business name in Australia, but he's obviously done that. Welcome to the podcast, Colin Newlyn.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you, Joelle, for finding you and inviting you. I'm really interested, given what she's told me about the conversation that we're going to have today, to find out more.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well.
All right. So, Colin, a couple of easy questions before we get into the more detailed stuff. What podcast do you like to listen to?
There's a couple that I listen to regularly. One of which is Lead from the Heart, which is by Mark C. Crowley. That's what it says in the tin, really. That's what he talks about. He's been talking about it for about 10 years, and it seems to be getting some serious traction now. But he invites, lots of guests on there, lots of psychologists and stuff, and also Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, which is by Bruce Daisley. and I think he calls it a mixture of work culture and psychology. So, a bit of a thread there. But they both have really interesting guests, I think, and from quite a broad spectrum. Because so I think it's good to look at lots of different fields when looking at this stuff.
And you co-host a podcast as well, don't you?
Yeah, we do one called Work Punks, which is 3 white middle-aged guys sitting around pontificating. But we're not pontificating about diversity, so that's okay. And we had our first guest recording this week, so it's just a bit of fun. Keeps us off the streets,
Yeah. No, podcasting is fun. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. Yes, and we certainly enjoy the guest aspect of it as well. We get to meet lots of people and have conversations that you wouldn't get to have at a conference if you were listening to somebody doing a keynote. So that's what we enjoy about it. One of the things.
Yeah, and ticking our continuing professional development box for our regulator here in Australia. Yeah.
So, Colin, can you tell us about your professional career, please?
So I had a 25 odd years in corporate life. And I always say it's split into 2 parts. So I spent a long time with a large telecoms organisation in the UK, and the first half of it was great because it was in this sort of new technology areas, quite entrepreneurial, and you had lots of opportunity to, if you've got an idea, people would say, go and see what you can do with it. I really enjoyed being there, and it was fun, lots of personal growth, and then we got sucked into another part of the business, which was sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. It was very hierarchical, very command and control and fear driven. And that was pretty awful, really. So, and ended up, being quite damaging. And I was sort of stuck with this conundrum, because the first part of that period of my career was very productive. People were being very creative and innovative and all that stuff that companies say they want. And the second half was, people were not doing stuff like that, obviously. And you'd think more companies would be like the first bit, but more companies seem to be going down the route of, that command and control and hierarchy and stuff. So that had been sort of nagging away at me for a while. So I had another couple of jobs after that, which sort of ended. One ended in redundancy, and one we parted due to artistic differences, shall we say. So I sort of fell out of corporate and didn't know what to do, and I spent a bit of time doing some other projects. I did some coaching for a while, and then I got a bit sort of lost, and this issue wouldn't go away. So about 3 and a bit years ago, I sort of thought, I'm going to start writing about this because it's annoying me. So that was when Decrapify Work started. And shortly after that, along came the pandemic, and everybody had to work at home. And I'd been a remote, I'd always had a laptop since about the early 90s, and been going around the world, in the country, logging into my email, crawling under desks to plug in modems and stuff like that. And I had a flexible approach to work. So when everybody else started doing that, I thought, the world's caught up at last. But it seems that's not quite how it's worked out.
So I guess you've been on a professional mission statement that we love, which is Decrapify Work. It's actually similar to Adam Grant, right? Like, make work not suck.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's we really resonate with that as a mission. So tell us a bit about that and what you're doing in Decrapify Work.
I sort of the reason I came up with that was I sort of came up with this idea this concept of the process of crapification, which is that over the last 20, 30 years or so, work has just got progressively more crap. And this is due to the forces of crapification, which is, profits before people and lots of process, measuring efficiency rather than effectiveness. The constant pressure of doing more for less, having to always be available because you've got a phone in your pocket and your boss thinks he can phone you up at 2 a.m, and that's okay. All these things that have sort of just progressively made work worse. And it wasn't great in the first place at times, as I knew from my own experience. So it's really about trying to make people aware of what's going on in their work situation, how that's affecting them, and giving them some ideas of how to mitigate that and navigate their way through that. Because, I had a bad experience at corporate life, really. And I met a lot of people since. And a lot of that was because I didn't really understand what was going on. And I think when you're in those situations, you never think it's as bad as it really is. And it's only afterwards when you look back, you think, oh God, if I didn't realise that's what was happening, then I would have behaved differently. I could have taken different actions or, taken a different approach.
So what sort of support do you provide to your clients to help them decrapify work?
Well, currently I'm sort of mostly around coaching people. But yeah, I'm looking at, if I can develop some courses and stuff, but also just raising general awareness, so I blog regularly on LinkedIn, do stuff like this, try and get the word out, and looking at other ways of expanding that.
Yeah. And is it coaching primarily people leaders on what they can do, or is it the employees themselves who are subjected to crap work?
Yes, I prefer working with the employees, but I'm not. I don't mind. I mean, if other people want to work with me, but there's sort of three types, I guess, that I've identified that I was in that situation in my career. One of which was being in an organisation and trying to make change happen, both in a positive and a negative space. And then there's a bit of a sort of situation people get into where they. Quite often you end up in a role where you quite like the work, but you're not enjoying the role and the people and the people above you and the situation. And you don't know what your options are because you're probably, in the middle of your middle career. That can be difficult. And then of course, if like me, you end up sort of falling out of corporate, how do you navigate your way after that?
Yeah, terrific.
So yeah, people who get stuck at different phases of their career path by the sounds of it, and you help get them unstuck.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it's people who have that, I have to do something. No, I'm not happy with this, but I can't just sit back and.
So, well, there's certainly plenty of crap going on in the world of work at any point in time. So we've got lots of fodder that we could talk about. The topic that that I've reached out to you today about, because I do see you posting on this quite a bit, is the return to the office push that's coming from some quarters, some people, some areas. So based on your observations of this and sort of the commentary that's been going on, which groups are sort of the primary drivers behind this return to the office push?
So I think I think there's some of the obvious suspects, which are the people that own the offices, the landlords, and they've got quite a lot of power and influence. And I think there's a lot of media stuff that they're driving, and government it's a bit mixed, but sometimes government supports them, sometimes they don't. City governments are also wanting people back in the office because they're worried about revenues and long-term economy of the city. But within the organisations, it's I think pretty clearly it's the guys at the top, and they often are guys who want people back in the office. And I think some managers as well, who are used to managing in that office environment struggle with a hybrid approach and just want to go back to when it was easy.
Yeah, I guess some of the bigger names that we've seen are like Elon Musk, who is pushing for people to go back to the office, whether that's Twitter or Tesla. Locally, we had Mineral Resources, which is a mining company that did that, and I can understand why. They spent a bomb on some really great, a great office environment. They've got like in-house barista and gym and all this sort of stuff, and yeah, I could see why they might think it's a bit wasteful if employees are choosing to work from home still rather than come into this gorgeous office that they've got. So I guess What do you see then as the main drivers for employers who want people to return to pre-pandemic work locations?
So I think there is a bit of that, well, we've spent all this money, the sunk cost fallacy. I think, there's also like power and ego and status, because if you're the boss and you've got the corner office, you want to come out and see people there, paying attention and working hard. So I think those are not unimportant drivers of the people at the top, and but they also have these, the beliefs, and I think they are beliefs that it works better, and they normally culture. But there's precious little evidence that those are actually impacted, and there's a bit of evidence in the opposite direction that actually, in some ways, teamwork has been better when people were working at home in the pandemic, which is a bit mad, really. And certainly we know that the office is a major source of distraction and disruption, and you've got the commute, which people find exhausting, and of course it's inflexible, so it doesn't help people integrate work in their lives. So yeah, I think there's a strong belief system within big organisations at the top that this is the right way to do things, but there's precious little evidence to show that that's true. What is clear though is that there's a pain of adjustment. It's not, these people have been working in this way for 20, 30 years. Having to change is difficult and challenging at times, and some of them would rather just not do that.
So do you think it's a problem primarily for leaders rather than employees? Who do you think it's impacting the most? The current hybrid, or the changes in what we've seen, the new normal, as I guess people are describing it, which is hybrid work?
I think the guys at the top are finding it a bit difficult. I think the people that are really probably struggling the most are those the middle managers who have been just told to sort this out and not always trained and supported to do that, or given the tools they need to do that. And that that middle management role has always been quite a tough job. I think it's become really tough now.
Yeah, now it's like the half forward in football. It's a tough job, but someone's going to do it.
I wouldn't know.
No, you wouldn't. It's a sports ball analogy.
It's a sports ball analogy.
Yeah.
So obviously there are, employers believe that there are benefits to that returning to the office arrangement. Do you think that there are benefits from having people in the office?
I don't think there are benefits from having people, full time back in the office. Clearly there are benefits in getting people together and using that time to build relationships and connections. But in terms of frequency and how you do that, I think that's quite variable. I don't think there's we had this sort of standard that applied right across the board of 5 days in the office for absolutely everybody. And I don't think that we're going to have another, we're not going to return to some standard again, because each industry is different, each organisation is different, each team is different. And also work, something I don't see very often talked about is, work has a cadence. And if you're working on a project, there are times in that project when you really all need to be together a lot of the time, closely connected, and other times when you don't. And so, there's lots of different forces affecting it. It's not, having a set routine is really not very helpful, I don't think. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
No, that's
and definitely something that we've observed, right? So there's no hard and fast rules in our office. It's kind of like, well, what's life throwing at you? Whether it's parkour, or whether it's my partner's gone back to work 2 days a week, and it's just going to be easier for me to work from home for 2 days a week. It's just, like you said,
or, I live a 90-minute drive from the office, and I don't want to do that twice a day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's really, like you say, with technology and the ability to do hybrid work, we can much better integrate work with life rather than getting life to stop for work. And so, taking more of an individualized approach about what works for different people. Like, I prefer to work in the office 5 days a week and distract everyone while I'm at it.
Jason is a big distraction. If you want to get work done, you're actually better off doing it from
And that's
home.
another reason why people choose to work remote sometimes to get work done, and so Jason won't distract me. I think there's lots of benefits, but I guess for those employers who are going, well, actually we want it to go back to pre-pandemic normal. We want people to come back to the office and that's it, just work 5 days a week from there, no choice. Are there potential adverse effects that they might not be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. I came across a great phrase the other day, which is instead of presenteeism, you get resenteeism, which is people in the office who are just pissed off because you dragged them back and made them do that, hour and a half commute, and all they're doing is sitting there doing Zoom calls and stuff. That's not going to be very good for productivity, morale, culture, or retention.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode. And that's something I guess we've been talking about, psychological health and safety or mentally healthy work as well. Like, if you're working for an employer that truly cares and is actually catering to creating work design that is good for your mental health, why would you choose to work anywhere else? So it's going to keep you there. But if you are working in a horrible place that's burning you out and you can see, over there, my friend's actually saying that they're doing a similar job and they love it because their employer cares so much, why wouldn't they just go and jump ship and work over there? So equal pay, but, much better conditions.
Yeah, I mean, it's been evidence that people actually will accept a pay cut for that benefit. And there was, Gallup did a study on, I can't remember if it's part of their global report or not, but it was a study on the perception that my employer cares for me. And it had risen quite a lot, from in the 20% to over 40% in the pandemic, because obviously there's a lot more communication, and it's plummeted since, and it's lower than it was before. So these return to office mandates are not going down well at all, and the perception is, that I don't care. And I think generally the guys at the top who are forcing these things through, they don't care.
Yeah, is it that they don't care, or they're not aware of how these mandates are actually changing perceptions of employees and some of these downside risks like you're talking about? Are they cognizant of those things, or does it factor into the decision making if they are?
I mean, in truth, I don't really know. Maybe a sort of a bit of willful ignorance there. They probably do know what the answer to that question is, so they're just not going to ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's always an element of the power dynamic there where there's that, I'm at the top of this organisation and I hold the power and I'm the one who gets to make these decisions, and you people who are employed by me don't have that same level of power. But then, there's a little bit of a reality check when we've got, tight labour markets and that sort of thing, where actually your workforce do have a lot of power in terms of who they choose to work for. And if they choose to not work for you, that really affects your ability to be competitive in the market as well. If you're, reducing the quality of candidates that actually want to work for you, if you're a last resort employer, then you're going to get, employees who are probably not your first choice either.
Yeah, and I hate to tell you this, Jason, but the world is not full of Jasons. Most people do not want to go back to the office 5 days a week. Most people.
Yeah, most people don't have 3 young kids.
Yeah, no, if I was in your situation, I might feel much the same. This is not something that's being driven by what employees want, because employees quite clearly want more flexibility. Yeah, I think they must know that they're ignoring. And and the other part of remote, of course, is a point. I don't know if you follow Chris Hurd at all, who's on LinkedIn a lot. He talks a lot about remote work. He makes the point that, if you're fully remote, you can hire the best talent from anywhere in the world, rather than hire talent from the 30 miles around your office. That's going to be a big factor in some industries.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly the case for us. We're recruiting some additional psychs into our team at the moment, and they're located over the other side of the country from us, the people that we're talking to at the moment. So it just gives us an enormous amount of flexibility and much more options in terms of who that talent is.
I remember when I was recruiting for your position, Joelle, and I had asked for a recommendation. It was a pretty short list of what I wanted as the experience profile and qualifications profile. I wanted an organizational psychologist who had experience with safety management systems and preferably had worked for a regulator. And 2 people in the whole state met that criteria. One was happy, one was Joelle. She's often unhappy.
I'm never happy.
Now that she's working with us and doing what she loves. But so it does, to find people in our field with particularly people who've got experience and are good at it, we do have to look farther afield than our own state. And that will be the same for, like you say, Joelle, any kind of occupation as well. You'll be able to hire the best talent if you have that hybrid work arrangement or ability for people to work full-time remote, if that's an option. Yeah,
and that sort of leads me into the next thing that I wanted to talk with you about, Colin, is that, it's not a binary situation here where we're sort of, all in the office all the time or all working from home all the time, right? We've got this thing that's called hybrid work. And there's lots of different approaches to that, I guess. So would you be able to describe for our listeners some of the more common hybrid models of work?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna pinch a model that I got from Christine Armstrong, who does a really good weekly vlog on LinkedIn. So she talks about there's 2 types of remote, which is 100% remote, or work from anywhere, which is remote where you get together on a regular basis. So people tend to get together like once every 3 months, and then you can choose any day to come in the office. And fixed hybrid, which is this, people have to be in Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. That seems to be quite a common model. And then she's got the 4-day week, which we haven't talked about yet, but as an option, and good old Elon's favoured approach of 100% back in the office. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good classification of the options. Or at least it's a good basis to start thinking about what you want to do.
Yeah, and so there would be pros and cons, I guess, for those different options. And from an employer's perspective, you would need to think about, how do we go about actually being productive in our workplace? How much of it is people sort of working in doing that deep work, I guess, where it's just their brain producing something, thinking about something? How much of it is collaborative? How much of that collaboration actually needs to be in person? So there's lots of different factors there. Are there others that you could think of that an employer would sort of want to think about?
Well, I mean, I mentioned before about the cadence of work and how projects are. But I think, this varies enormously across different types of industries and the type of work being done. So, this sort of where they've got a fixed days in the office, I think if you've got a work environment where the work is a bit unstructured and it's quite, maybe quite dynamic, you don't really quite know what's happening, then you've got a higher need to have people available if there's some sort of sudden event that you've got to respond to. So that possibly is an argument for going down that route. But if you've got a much more structured work program, then the fluid hybrid or the work from anywhere is very possible. So I think to some degree there's how good is the leadership and the management, how well performing is the company. Because if it's a bit of a chaotic environment and managers are always reactive and the leaders don't really know where they're going, then they're going to want people in the office because they don't really know what they're doing from one day to the next. Whereas perhaps a better structured and managed organisation might have a bit more forethought and be able to give people that flexibility.
So it sounds like probably focusing on upskilling middle management in particular in different approaches to management and how you can actually effectively manage a hybrid group of workers would be a good step for organisations to take in terms of being able to do this successfully.
I think so. And I think also actually, like training the workers, the employees in how to operate in that environment, in those teams, and giving them the tools to manage their time and priorities in that way. Because I don't think people get taught that very much. It's sort of assumed, how to organise your work, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess depending on what sort of background you've come through into the workplace as well, and how long you've been maybe working in a very rigid work environment as well, it can those muscles can atrophy over time. I guess that sort of self-management type of an approach.
It's also different personality. We haven't really talked about different personalities as well, So some people are more diversity. For some people, they prefer to be out of the office, working on their own more. All of these factors come into play in trying to figure out what the best way forward is. And I think we need to equip leaders and managers to accommodate.
Yeah, and then so you've just made me also think about sort of people with disabilities, people with neurodivergence, that whole group of really underemployed, usually people who have really enjoyed the pandemic because it's actually given them much more access to work than they've previously had. And so, again, from a benefits perspective, from an employer, you've got a whole segment of the workforce opening up to you there if you're able to facilitate that hybrid work or that remote work in a way that's effective for your business.
Yeah, and people with caring responsibilities, which is often women, but increasingly, the dads are getting involved as well. So parenting responsibilities can be taken on board much more. I've got my son's and his wife have just had a grandson, and he's much more involved in his son's care than I was, and it seems to me that's much more rewarding for him. And I think that's a good thing for companies, but it's a good thing for society as well.
Yes, having more dads involved at an earlier age is definitely better for society, I think. And I'm sure that there's data around there to support that as well. I'm interested in hearing a bit more about asynchronous work as well. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think this is where the big wins are. I mean, the conversation so far has been very much about location and how days in and days out, but it's actually embracing new ways of working that can enable companies to become much more effective, I believe. And async's a big part of that. So, what we saw in the pandemic was we've been sitting in offices working synchronously together, and the pandemic came along, and all that happened was all that synchronous work was stuck online. So we're sitting on Zooms rather than sitting in meetings. Whereas if you're working asynchronously, you can get rid of an awful lot of the meetings for starters, which is a massive time suck for almost everybody. And there's a lot of talk about making meetings more effective. Well, the most effective meeting is one you don't have. So async work means, documenting what goes on, having clear process, having the information available for everybody when they need it. And it's also enables people to, then manage their work to do it at the time that suits them, which may be to do with, their other life commitments, but it may just be, their personal biocycle. Some people would love to work in the morning. Some people love to work late at night. Async enables people to put the work where they're going to be most effective. So I think that's really, that's where companies have got big wins on offer if they want to take them.
Yeah, and there's so much technology now to support it, right? With cloud file sharing and, different, we use probably most of the kind of project management boards like Trello and, some of the Teams resources and stuff. We have a member of our team who we call the Serbian Elf. He's a developer who started with us in our Perth office, but then during COVID, he went back to be closer to his family in Serbia and he's continued just to work for us from there. But there's a good time zone difference, right? About 7 hours difference. So he'll typically start in the afternoon our time and then work into the wee mornings, so wee hours of the morning. And so what our developers often will do, they'll do a bit of a handover with him in the afternoon, and then he continues to do his bit at night, and then we come in the morning and it's all done. So it feels like magic sometimes. It's like, hey, here's a problem that needs to be solved. You do that overnight, and we come back the next day, it's done, and we keep moving. So there's actually some productivity gains rather than halting the whole team. It's like, this is something that can get done overnight, and then we can continue to be productive when we come in the next day.
I mean, there used to be a thing called follow the sun, which, the major national corporations used to do for customer service typically. But that used to be to get, it's not just about the productivity. And there seems to be some link between the two. I don't know if anybody's noticed that.
Okay. It's about that time.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, Colin, it's been interesting chatting with you. It's something that we've been observing a lot, and people have been sharing a lot about their experiences, whether they be good or bad, on LinkedIn, either as a leader or as an employee who's subjected to some of these management decisions, and definitely stuff that we've been trialing ourselves, like within our own office. So it is something that's close to home. So really interesting discussion, and hopefully our listeners have gotten a lot out of it as well. But about this point in time in all of our podcasts, we like to ask our guests a question. I guess we haven't spoken directly about mental health specifically, but I guess in terms of the future of work, what are your hopes for the future of work? I spoke earlier about this sort of conundrum that had been bothering me, that we know what the good ways of working are, but we seem to keep going down this path of making life work crappier and more oppressive. I'd like to reverse that trend and take work back to being something that was much more human and, back to those early days that I had, where it's an opportunity for growth and development and learning, rather than something you have to endure so you can get through the rest of your life. It should be, the work should be something that is a positive contribution to your enjoyment of life, not distraction or a negative, as it is for far too many people. Yeah, I think it's that human factors question, right? Like, how do we design the work around people rather than designing to an outcome? So if we're designing to an outcome like, patient safety or student achievement, if we're thinking about health and education, we sometimes forget about the people doing the work. But if we say, hey, look, we want to have the best teaching or education in the world, or we want to have the best healthcare in the world, what does that look like if we start with the people who are delivering that service? Because we know if we look after those people, then the outcomes will take care of themselves. So, yeah, I'm with you. I much prefer to see in the future that, work is designed around the needs of humans rather than people having to fit into a box to achieve an outcome that is not necessarily congruous with good health or mental well-being.
Yeah, and I think there's a big thing about, my wife was a teacher. She got sort of gave up the teaching side because of this process orientation and measurement and all that sort of stuff. the question shouldn't be, how do we measure a good teacher? The question should be, what do we need to put in place to make all teachers good teachers? How do we support the talent they have, rather than trying to make them fit into this, process where they're all supposed to do the same thing. So I'm with you on that one.
And Colin, any words of advice for listeners who are sort of wanting to either adopt or improve hybrid working in their organisation or team?
Yeah, I think, the first thing is that I think we're in a process here. There isn't a great leap from, the pandemic sort of put its hand gently in the back of large organisations and gave them a big shove into the future. But generally, it's more of an evolution to get to a better place. So rather than trying to come up with a solution for, even these different working models, we're going to go for that one. Just see how you can evolve towards it. One of the small changes you can make that give people a bit more autonomy, give them a bit more choice, and start having have those conversations with people like what would you need to make you better at what you're doing. And I think it has to be that ongoing conversation, because as we move forward, it'll be responsive to that and adaptive to that. So it should be, I feel, the way you work should be part of a continual dialogue between employees and their managers and the leadership of the organisation.
Well, I'm sure that our listeners will have lots of food for thought to take away from today. So thank you so much, Colin.
It's been a pleasure.
And Colin, I'm assuming you're on LinkedIn. You said you blog a bit, and I think that's where Joelle came across your work.
I'm on LinkedIn as Colin Newlyn. I also do a weekly newsletter on Substack as Decrapify Work. So you can find me in either of those places.
Yeah, and the name of your podcast again?
The podcast is called Work Punks. It is currently on YouTube, but it's going to be on all the podcast platforms really soon.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Colin, again, for helping us out with this episode and sharing, some of your observations and experience with crap work related particularly to working arrangements. So, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Been a pleasure.
Okay, listeners, that brings us to the end of this episode. So don't forget, we do video these when we do have our conversations with our guests. So you can catch the videos of our podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. You can also check out short clips from our episodes on the LinkedIn page for Flourish DX. And while you're over on LinkedIn, obviously you can find Colin, and you'll also find Joelle and myself over there too if you want to continue the conversation. But that brings us to the end of today. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.